This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
Oral questions, the honourable member from Regina Capel.
Day after day brings new sordid details about the employment minister's scandal. And yesterday we learned that his company shares a mailing address with an international drug trafficker who's been busted for cocaine not once, but twice. He's been caught out in falsehoods, caught faking Indigenous identity to try to secure government contracts meant for real Indigenous people, and his company is under investigation for 9 fraud-related counts. Why on earth has the Prime Minister not fired this man?
Right.
The Honourable Minister for Employment and Workforce Development.
Mr. Speaker, as I said yesterday, I don't know the person referred to in that article. I've never met that person. It's stated in the article, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
Let's recap the scandal so far. He said he was Indigenous, even though he wasn't. He said his great-grandmother was Cree, even though she wasn't. He said there was another Randy working at the company, even though there wasn't, that he had nothing to do with the company while he was in cabinet, even though he was, and his company got a contract while he was sitting around the cabinet table. In a normal government, any one of those scandals would be cause for dismissal.
Yeah, that's right.
So why in this wacko Liberal government does this man still sit in cabinet?
And ask members to be very judicious in their use of words.
The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister has already answered this question many times. The question that we still haven't had an answer for is why the Conservative leader's scandal, who refuses to seek his security clearance and protect himself and his future members during the next election, what is he hiding? When he refuses to get information about the risks of foreign interference for the upcoming elections, thank you. I would ask the honourable member to not speak until the chair recognizes him.
Regina Capel.
Well, we don't know what it'll take for this guy to get fired from this Prime Minister. We do know what will get you fired. Remember Jody Wilson-Raybould? She was fired for telling the truth about the Prime Minister's attempts to interfere in a criminal case. Here's what she had to say. A Prime Minister committed to true reconciliation would have removed this minister and the other Randy from cabinet long ago. Instead, we get to watch white people play Ancestry Wheel of Fortune. Ouch. How come under this Prime Minister, a strong Indigenous woman gets fired for telling the truth when a weak, fake Indigenous man gets to keep his job after lying?
Again, I'm going to ask the honourable member from Regina Capel, who once sat in this chair, to withdraw that one word which was directly used to another member, which would not be considered parliamentary, and ask the honourable member to do so.
I'll withdraw the word lying and replace it with telling falsehoods.
Yes.
The actual word. The word which was being used. I'm going to ask the honourable member to withdraw the word fake, please.
Sorry, just for the Speaker to clarify, the word fake, but the Minister did...
He faked all those things.
The Minister is now admitting that he's not Indigenous, so he pretended to be something that he wasn't.
Colleagues, colleagues, yesterday Yesterday there were members who were asked to withdraw that very same word, and the member did. And so I'm going to ask the honourable member if he could please do so.
I will withdraw the word fake and replace it with either sham, imitation, counterfeit.
The honourable member. Colleagues, I've always insisted, I'm going to ask all members please not to take the floor while the Speaker is addressing Parliament. When it has been the tradition of this place to ask very tough questions, to keep government accountable. It's important for government, of course, to provide very clear answers. But we try to do this in a way that allows people to treat each other with decorum and respect. And so the honourable member has sat in this chair, in this position once before. Yesterday we asked a number of members to, when it was referring to a particular member, to withdraw that same word that I'm just asking for today. I just asked the honourable member just to withdraw that word so we could just move on.
Mr. Speaker, when I sat in that chair, I heard the word fake being used many, many times.
I will come back to this issue later on. I will come back to this issue near the end of question period. We're the Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, but I think that little display of disrespect for that place is ubiquitous of how Conservative members treat this place. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, they are trying to distract and make a mockery.
Colleagues. I'm going to ask the honourable member, the honourable members need I'm going to ask the honourable member from Lanark, Hastings, Addington to please. Sorry, forgive me. Lanark, forgive me, the honourable member from Lanark, Frontenac and Kingston to please not take the floor when he is not recognised to do so. Now, colleagues, I do not know if the Honourable Minister had finished her answer because I was not able to hear her. So I'm going to ask the Honourable Minister to start from the top.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think this shameful display of disrespect from the Conservative members of Parliament for this place is on display today, and it is exactly how they have been operating for the past couple of weeks. Mr. Speaker, it is time for them to stop filibustering and obstructing the work of Parliament. It is time for them to start respecting this place, respecting the work we do here on behalf of Canadians. We have deposited up to 29,000 pages worth of documents. They need to stop these games and let everybody get back to work on behalf of Canadians. Thank you.
the honourable member from St. Margaret, South Shore, to please not take the floor. And to all colleagues, we are wasting a fair bit of time. And to making sure that members get going, we might have to cut a couple of questions from today. So let us make sure that we follow up very carefully and we listen to the instructions. The honourable member from Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands and Vito Lakes.
To get government contracts, the Liberal Minister from Edmonton said that he was Indigenous, but he's not. He said that he wasn't the Randy who was involved in the ongoing operations of the company that was applying for government contracts, but text messages show that he was. Now, he also said he wasn't directing his company from the cabinet table, but we know that that's also not true. Not true, not true, and not true. So we don't know which minister they're going to stand up, but what we want to know from that minister is, do they think that that behavior is appropriate, and do they think that he should remain in cabinet?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the minister has already responded to those questions. But what I find really interesting is that today marks 1,000 days since Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine, and we have not heard a single question about this from the Conservative members of Parliament. This is unsurprising for them, given the fact that when it comes to their support for Ukraine, it has been wavering over the past year. On this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, we stand for Ukraine. Do the Conservative members of Parliament?
Exactly. Question.
The Honourable Member from Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands and Vito Lakes.
Well, I'm glad that the minister showed up for work, but she must have been late enough to not hear our statement where we expressed, of course, our support for Ukraine. But let's focus on the facts. The facts are that their cabinet colleague is involved with cocaine traffickers. Their cabinet colleague is pretending to be Indigenous in order to disenfranchise Indigenous-owned companies and Indigenous people. That's who they're in league with. That minister can't seem to tell the truth to save his own life. So Randy or other Randy or pretend Indigenous Randy, none of them should be in cabinet. Why won't they fire this fraudster?
Again, for the second day in a row, I'm going to ask the Honourable Member from Leeds Grenville to, on the very last part of his question, using language which just can't pass in this place. The Honourable Member, will he just simply withdraw that question and then we can move on? Withdraw that word and then we could just simply move on.
The word fraudster is withdrawn.
I thank the Honourable Member. The Honourable Leader of the Government of the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I guess the member opposite wasn't paying attention to my answer because I said we were halfway through question period and I had yet to hear a question from the members opposite about the war of aggression by Russia on Ukraine. And Mr. Speaker, let's look at the facts. This time last year, they were holding up and voting against the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, an agreement that Ukraine had asked us for as an ally. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to meaningful action, they do everything they can to hold back support from Ukraine, and we're seeing that today too. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, it seems that either the Employment Minister or the other Randy actually might also be moonlighting as a magician. We know he says he's Indigenous, even though he's not. We know he stole from Indigenous Canadians. We know he said he wasn't involved in the company when he was in cabinet, but he was. But today, perhaps as a magician, he has made his business partners disappear. Shauna Parker and Felix Papineau have disconnected their phone numbers, they deactivated their emails, and they are nowhere to be found to avoid the scrutiny of this Parliament. So will the minister stand up, wave his magic wand, and tell his business partners to show up here?
The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. It's really unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, to hear so many falsehoods and so little time in this House. It's really unfortunate that the Conservatives are investing all of their energy in falsehoods that are derailing the House and detract from the work of the House, from what's important, and that is working for Quebecers and Canadians. But one thing that we still don't know the answer to is why the Conservative leader, who sits next to the member, has not sought his security clearance so they can protect all members during the next election.
The honourable member from Thornhill.
If the minister doesn't know where to find these individuals, perhaps he can ask the other Randy, who's still very much in contact with those partners. But even the Liberals are taking note of this humiliating and fraudulent affair. Liberals like Jody Wilson-Raybould, who called it, quote, so shameful and extremely destructive. The Prime Minister fires the first Indigenous Attorney General, but keeps the first fake Indigenous Employment Minister. That's some version of reconciliation. When is the Prime Minister going to fire the Employment Minister and the other Randy?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister has addressed those issues. He has stated that what the member opposite said is false. But, Mr. Speaker, what we want to know is why is the Leader of the Opposition silencing his members of Parliament? Why won't he allow his members of Parliament to speak on behalf of their constituents and advocate for their communities? Mr. Speaker, all we hear from the Leader of the Opposition is silencing his own members of Parliament, Mr. Speaker. Why won't he just let them speak? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Employment is embroiled in allegations of fraud. He almost certainly violated the Conflict of Interest Act. He got caught pretending to be Indigenous in an effort to steal government contracts from legitimately owned Indigenous businesses. And we now learn that the Minister has a business connection to a cocaine trafficker. In the face of all of that, why is he still in Cabinet?
The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. The member has once again combined all sorts of falsehoods to make some sense of the story, but the minister has answered these questions on several opportunities. All of this is false, and we still don't know, however, how the member who asked the question will protect himself against foreign interference during the upcoming election if his Conservative leader refuses to seek his security clearance. How will he know if he's protected from foreign interference under the next election?
Member from St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, one must ask why the Prime Minister hasn't seen fit to fire this minister. Could it be that the Prime Minister violated the Conflict of Interest Act not once, but twice? Could it be that the Prime Minister is a cultural appropriator, having worn blackface more times than he can remember? Isn't it the case that if the Prime Minister were to fire the minister, he'd have to fire himself?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, what Canadians are witnessing today is very disturbing, Mr. Speaker. On many occasions, you had questions that were asked and answer that was provided, Mr. Speaker. But the real issue that Canadians are asking at home is why the leader of the Conservative would not get the security clearance, would not get the briefing, and would not do his job, Mr. Speaker. That's what Canadians are concerned about. Get the clearance, get the briefing, and do your job, man.
I invite all members to ensure that they ask their questions to the Speaker. That they speak to the Speaker, whether or not they ask questions or give answers. The
Honourable Member for Charles-Bourg-Saint-Charles. The Minister of Official Languages said he was Indigenous so he can get money for Indigenous companies, even though he's not. The famous Randy, he says isn't him, even though we know there's only one Randy there. He's an imposter and a charlatan. He's corrupt. On several occasions, I have asked all members to be very cautious in terms of the language that they are using. This time, the language that is being used directly impugns another member of this place, and I would ask the Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles to ask his question again and to retract his comments and to re-ask his question. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Official Languages has said he's Indigenous. I would ask you to remove your comments first, retract them, and then start your question again. The Honourable Member for Saint-Charles. I'd like to retract that he's a fraudster and corrupt, and I will say instead that he has committed fraud and corruption. Is that okay? No. That won't work. I would ask members to follow the members of other who asked the question yesterday, and their retraction was acceptable. So I'd ask the member once again, please, to retract his comments and then ask his question again. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next question. We can't say the minister is a fraudster and corrupt. Instead, there are allegations of fraud and corruption with respect to this minister, and I would ask the Prime Minister to remove him from cabinet. The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Our colleague from Charlebourg-Saint-Charles is obviously just having a hard time expressing himself today, but one thing we do agree on is that the whole story of his Conservative leader who saying that the agreement we have with the government of Quebec is to build 8,000 housing units, but he said there are none, but there are dozens in his own riding. So these units are being built. So when will he ask his Conservative leader to go himself and see that there are truly projects in his riding? The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. The minister is trying to divert from the question, but the Minister of Official Languages in 2015 said that he was a journalist and even worked for Radio Canada and Les Affaires. We know it's not true, Mr. Speaker. He also led people to believe he was Indigenous to get funds for Indigenous companies. He no longer deserves to be in cabinet. Will the Prime Minister show him the door? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. The Minister has already answered these questions, but what we still haven't heard, Mr. Speaker, is the opinion of the Conservative member for Charlebourg in terms of his riding and the projects that are being built. There are dozens of affordable housing units that have been built with the agreement with the Quebec government that we signed. But his Conservative leader is saying that these units don't exist. When he show all of us, ask his leader to go visit these wonderful housing units that his leader says don't exist.
I will member from St. Margaret's, South Shore St. Margaret's for the second time today to not take the floor when not recognized. I would not like to remind him a third time.
The federal government has once again made a clean getaway on passports, while the federal government is being questioned about its border plan in the face of Donald Trump's deportation threats. Radio Canada reveals that the federal government issued a passport to a criminal smuggler known to authorities, a repeat human trafficker. A man implicated in the deaths of 9 migrants in the river last spring. This man was given a passport by Service Canada. How is it possible to be so dangerously incompetent? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees. Mr. Speaker, if what she's alleging is true, I will do verifications with Service Canada and other safety agencies, and I'd be happy to report back to the House then when the time comes. Thank you.
And ask the Honourable Member from Battle River Crowfoot, please, to not take the floor when not recognized by the Chair. The Honourable Member from Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Peterborough. A Brock.
Speaker, reports continue to reveal one false statement after another about the employment minister's claim of Indigenous heritage. The fact he is still in cabinet has laid bare the reality that truth and reconciliation mean nothing to Liberals. We found out today the company co-owned by the minister, GHI, is in fact green-lit to bid on government contracts. Wow. This is the same company that falsely claimed to be wholly Indigenous owned while inventing this fictional other Randy and sharing a mailbox with an alleged cocaine smuggler. Will the Prime Minister just end the charade and fire the minister?
Yeah. The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It only seems apparent that the Conservatives want to talk about reconciliation when it's allegation, but rather they don't want to talk about reconciliation when we're talking about investing in First Nations housing or helping Indigenous people ensure their opportunities to have economic success or procure from the government of Canada. They don't want to talk about that, Mr. Speaker, because you know why? Their record is shameful, Mr. Speaker. In fact, they have continually cut services for Indigenous people. When they were in power, we will do the opposite.
The Honourable Member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Speaker, during committee and just now, the Minister of Indigenous Services refused to defend her colleague, the pretend Indigenous Minister of Employment. The Minister of Employment pretended to be Indigenous so that his company could steal contracts from Indigenous communities and businesses. While the Prime Minister continues to be the defender of the pretender, even his cabinet colleagues are losing faith. Now, this question is for the Minister of Indigenous Services. Will she stand up and defend her cabinet colleague, or should he be fired?
Good.
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
You know, Mr. Speaker, just moments ago I was speaking with the National Chief about the shenanigans that are happening at 9 Committee as the Conservatives attempt to undermine the study of the water legislation that so many First Nations have poured their heart and soul into, Mr. Speaker, preventing it from actually getting to this place and hopefully eventually to Senate. They talk about standing up for First Nations people, but